Following the death of the great Isao Takahata, I have decided to take a look at his most celebrated film. Grave of the Fireflies tells the story of a teenage boy named Seita as he attempts to care for his young sister Setsuko after the death of their mother during World War II. It is perhaps the most acclaimed anime film directed by someone other than Miyazaki, often revered as one of the most harrowing looks at war in cinema, animated or otherwise. However, while on the surface a war film, it dives into a more universal human flaw. Grave of the Fireflies opens with a stunningly blunt declaration. By opening up the film with the protagonist naming the date of his death, Takahata immediately removes any sense of suspense from the narrative. This is not a film that wants you to question what is going to happen. Takahata wants you to know the exact trajectory so that you can instead question why. The scene cuts to Seita dying in a crowded train station. People walk by, for this has become a regular occurrence in their world. Others are soon shown in the same position. The notable thing here is that the date is actually after the end of World War II. Even the end of combat did not mean the end of suffering. But this is not solely a film about war. Seita's last words as he dies is his sister's name. Underneath the violence lies a story of destructive pride. Before diving into the details, the film takes a moment to present its single sequence of hope, as the spirit of Seita and Setsuko are reunited. But even this is disrupted by the violence of war. There is no escape, not even fantasy. The main story begins with an air raid. It's the little details that add up. Instead of fleeing, Seita first buries their goods. There's an odd casualness about this scene. These raids have become so familiar, they show little sign of fear until they can actually hear the bombs dropping. There's a great set of shots here that cuts to a ladder and a body of water before cutting to a nearby fire. This juxtaposition paints the fire as just part of the ordinary. It takes only a few seconds for the entire town to erupt into flame and smoke. The shift is striking as the bright blue skies are replaced with grays. There's a magnificent shot as the two kids run to the beach, the distant shore covered in flames. There is literally nowhere to run. Where this sequence began with the suggestion that this was the new normal, this belief is immediately shattered. War will never be normal. Life in this state is suffering. In the aftermath of the fire, Seita comforts Setsuko, who is so innocent that her main concern becomes her missing shoe. Her innocence is the sticking point of this movie's drama. She will never truly understand what is happening to her. Seita plays into her childhood fantasies, which starts off cute enough here, but eventually becomes a cause of their downfall. Where Setsuko can't understand reality, Seita refuses to confront it. Where Studio Ghibli is known for their nature shots, Grave of the Fireflies leaps into the opposite, wide shots of the entire city in destruction. These moments look like hell on earth. Takahata never cuts away from the horror. Charred bodies cover the screen. The most devastating shot occurs as Seita finds his mother. Before we even see her, we are informed she could only be identified through her ring. Again, it's these little narrative details that add up. We can feel the dread build as Seita stares at the ring. Like in the opening, Takahata removes hope before revealing the truth. There is no desire to surprise. Everything here is as inevitable as it is horrible. The image of the mother's body is hard to take in, and it's even harder to comprehend that she's only sleeping. The few bits of skin we can see through her bandages are charred. Takahata knows it's not enough to simply talk of war. The effects must be shown in detail. As Setsuko asks to see their mother, Seita refuses. When he fails to calm her, Seita immediately turns toward distraction. He attempts to stop his sister's tears by showing off on a bar, but she doesn't look his way. In the end, this action is truly for his own benefit. This moment of failed escape is immediately brought back to the mother, now dead and covered in maggots. This movie was notoriously paired with My Neighbor Totoro during its release in Japan, and though that pairing is often remarked upon for the striking tonal differences between the films, it is worth noting how similar their central structures are. Both involve a pair of children moving to the countryside, but where Satsuki and Mei discover a truly magical world, Seita and Setsuko can only pretend. In a way, Grave of the Fireflies feels like a conscious inversion of Totoro. In the clearest example of Seita outright denying reality, he refuses to inform even his aunt that his mother has passed away. It's as if speaking this fact into the world would make it true. Seita finally admits the truth once he is alone with his aunt. He again is able to use his sister as an excuse, but he could have told her in the meantime. It's not until she directly asks that he is forced to confront the truth. The aunt is repeatedly shown as cold and almost uncaring throughout this film, seemingly feeling little impact from the death of the mother. But this is the harsh truth of the film. To survive means to accept the despair. Seita and Setsuko play with the fireflies at night. Setsuko is immediately enamored with their beauty, but in her ignorant joy, accidentally crushes one in her hands. In this film, innocence is not an inherently positive trait. Ignorance can lead to death. Though Setsuka only has enough responsibility to harm a bug, Seita has a much bigger life in his hands. It is during this scene that we are first introduced to the tin of fruit drops, which serves as the visual embodiment of hope in this film. It's a simple joy, but one they can't truly afford. Seita even hides it from the ant, aware but still engaging in his excess. We soon get another scene where escape is immediately interrupted with death. The two kids play on the beach until Setsuka chases a crab and stumbles across the body. Again, avoiding the issue at hand is punished, but Seita continues to hide the truth. We get a brief moment where the aunt finally lays out the situation. She asks Seita to sell his mother's kimonos for food, but points out that she too has sold much of her possessions to survive. It appears to be this moment where Setsuka realizes the truth. We are given a shot of the future spirit of Seita watching the scene unfold. He looks away in anguish, seeming to realize what he had done. Worth pointing out is that this film is based on a semi-autobiographical story. Naturally, the real Seita must have survived. In a way, these moments read as PTSD-tinted reflections, and that opening shot a blunt statement. Maybe he didn't die, but the guilt he would carry due to his failures to protect his sister makes him wish he had. There's a scene involving the aunt that is absolutely gut-punching. She chastises Seita for not doing anything, promising to feed them porridge due to his behavior. There's this continued sense of misunderstanding that dots this movie. She appears to be pushing him toward working, but his response is to instead focus on his own survival. Few concepts are ever spoken directly between the two. Something is always being implied or left out that the other is going to miss. Seita's form of survival is again an example of childish excessiveness. He immediately spends more than he needs at the store, having no understanding of the limits of his resources. The aunt's intentions are then made perfectly clear, as she claims his purchasing of the cooker is purely out of spite. But this is again not communicated directly to him. As their food runs low, the fruit drop tin likewise becomes empty. Methods of escape wear thin. Seita, instead of accepting it as gone, fills it with water to get the last bits of flavor out. He will do whatever it takes to not admit the truth. The big turning point of Grave of the Fireflies occurs when the aunt sarcastically suggests the two could live in the shelter, a suggestion that Seita takes to heart. Through his pride, he is incapable of realizing he needs his aunt to survive. The strive to survive is replaced with an idealized version of survival. It is from this point on that the war simply becomes the background of the film. Every moment of suffering that remains instead stems from Seita's refusal to ask for assistance. They light up the shelter with fireflies. This is a rare moment where the film embraces Ghibli's tendency towards natural beauty. This dark cave morphs into something like a night sky, the two staring at the ceiling in joy. But by the time they awake, the fireflies are dead. Natural beauty can only offer so much. It is not a means of survival. Setsuka buries the fireflies and remarks upon their mother's death. Seita appears devastated, but it's clear Setsuka has already accepted the truth. Seita crying, again, suggests his hiding of the truth was actually for his own benefit. A group of boys runs by their shelter, first curious and then making fun of the horrid conditions they find. Any outsider is immediately aware that the two are living in squalor, but Seita cannot admit the truth. While begging for food, a farmer tells Seita to apologize to his aunt and move back in. This is where the trajectory becomes undeniable. Seita is incapable of accepting his mistakes. In his mind, thievery is the more honorable option. Though it is easy to blame the aunt, Seita has no justification for continuing down this path. After he is beaten by a farmer, Setsuka suggests she gets a doctor for Seita. In this moment, even Setsuka is more aware of the direness of their situation. But Seita just keeps on his downward spiral, resorting to stealing from houses during air raids. His end goal becomes incomprehensible. Does he want to survive, or does he want to prove that he can manage it himself? Who is he even proving this to? Why is survival on his own more desirable than survival with the help of others? His actions are more for show than a logical form of providing. Seita eventually takes Setsuka to a doctor, where he is coldly informed that his sister only needs food. Again, the adults of this film appear uncaring, but Seita likewise refuses to make his situation clear. He wants to hide in the forest like an idealistic romanticist. He has less in common with other victims of war as he does with someone like Christopher McCandless. He is a continuous victim of his own decisions, but unlike McCandless, he has dragged an innocent child along with him. So separated from society at this point, Seita learns of the Japanese surrender well after it has happened, along with the implications of his father's death. The fantasy of escape has blinded him to the world. Seita returns to their shelter to find Setsuka eating marbles, pretending they are fruit drops from the tin. At this point, Setsuka is literally killing herself through fantastical delusions. She even presents balls of dirt as rice balls. Seda giving his sister watermelon suggests they may have finally found their way through the situation. But they had always had a way out, but now it's too late. The scene of Seda returning to town to prepare for Setsuka's funeral really drives the pointlessness of his efforts home. People appear cheerful now that the war has ended. Life and brightness have returned. Seda truly is alone in his self-created suffering. The film gives us a montage of Setsuka playing at the shelter. It is unclear if these are memories or again Seda's fantasy of what could have been. There is desperation for a greater meaning in this pointless loss. As Seda burns Setsuka's body, he considers burying her with a fruit drop tin before deciding to use it to store her ashes. In this action, hope gives way to despair. Seita no longer fantasizes about surviving on his own. Guided by both his guilt and pride, he soon accepts his own death even as survival with others is easier than any point before. Grave of the Fireflies works in large part by luring us in with the promise of something grander. We want this to be a story of universal suffering. We want to see the uncomfortable truth of war. Instead, Takahata takes this setting to explore the worst parts of human nature. It is an assault on the notion of false hopes through escapism, and an exploration of the fallacy of pride in the face of imminent death. Yet, because of the stakes and situation, it is likewise difficult for us to truly blame Seda. If there wasn't this backdrop of war, none of this would have happened. Seda wouldn't have been pushed to test out his survival skills. Both forces are at play in the creation of this tragedy. There's a certain intimacy of this film that likewise is seldom seen in war films. This is a Japanese film about the end of World War II that never once mentions the nuclear bomb. For Seda, the death of his family is infinitely more devastating. This narrow focus helps us sympathize with Seda's goals, foolish as they are. Takahata is an expert at questioning the balance between beauty and necessity. Seda has much in common with the average Ghibli protagonist. He simply is not in the right place for those pursuits. War is no place for optimism, and misplaced idealism can be a quick path to death. In the end, Grave of the Fireflies hurts to watch because it is so real. Seda is incredibly flawed, but so are most teenagers. No one deserves to be put through this situation. This is the story of someone who wrongly believes he understands the cold world he lives in, but many people suffer from that same ignorance. Few pay for it with their lives.